Imagine you are just sitting at your kitchen table. You know, you've got your laptop open, maybe a cup of coffee that's just getting totally cold next to the mouse pad.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. And you finally found it. The perfect starter home.
The dream.
Exactly. So you click submit on your offer, and you're feeling that like crazy mix of terror and excitement. But in I think it's like 400 milliseconds, it takes your home Wi-Fi to ping the server.
Barely a blink.
Yeah, in that fraction of a second, a supercomputer sitting in some cooled, windowless warehouse 500 miles away, it analyzes your bid. It checks the historical property values of the neighborhood. It factors in the 30-year projection for local job growth.
Just crunching infinite variables.
Right. And then it automatically submits a cash offer $20,000 higher than yours. You lose the house before you even lift your finger off the trackpad.
Wow. That's incredibly bleak.
And the craziest part, that supercomputer didn't buy the house to live in it. It bought it to rent it back to you.
Which is just the ultimate invisible friction of the modern economy, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you are bringing a human heartbeat, a mortgage pre-approval, and like a dream to a literal gunfight against an algorithm.
Very well-funded algorithm.
Exactly. And it's optimized solely for maximum financial extraction.
Yeah.
I mean, the algorithm doesn't care about your commute. It doesn't care about the local school district. It only cares about yield.
Pure yield. And we are jumping straight into the deep end today because we are examining a text that forces us to look at that exact scenario, and then it actually extrapolates it out to its absolute, terrifying, and strangely utopian logical conclusion.
Yeah, it's a wild ride.
It really is. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are basically acting as the extraction software for a compressed zip file of an essay today.
A very dense zip file.
Oh, incredibly dense. It's from May 2026, titled "The Antichrist is a Tendency," penned by Paramendra. And I just want to warn you, listening to this, every single sentence in this piece is like a densely packed conceptual explosive.
It really reads like a modern tech manifesto, but it operates more like a diagnostic tool for global capitalism.
Yeah, diagnostic is a good word for it.
Because the author is taking extreme technological advancement, the structural DNA of capital, systemic poverty, and just welding them all together into the single framework.
Right. And our mission today is to really decode that framework. And I want to set the stage here early on. We are remaining completely objective today.
Absolutely.
Because the author makes some incredibly bold, highly political, and economic claims in this piece. I mean, everything from solving the immigration crisis to literally bypassing sovereign governments entirely.
Yeah, they do not hold back.
Not at all. So whether you view this framework as a terrifying dystopia or like a brilliant blueprint for a post-scarcity world, we're just treating these as fascinating thought experiments to be analyzed. We aren't endorsing them, we're unpacking the source text.
Makes sense. So where do we start?
Yeah.
Because the author strips the entire global economy right down to its studs.
Yeah, let's start right there with the foundation. The author divides the entire economy strictly into three distinct components. You have financial capital, which is, the money, the liquidity.
Right.
Then you have physical capital. So that's the technology, the machines, the infrastructure, AI, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, human capital, which is you, me, the people.
Think of it kind of like a closed thermodynamic system. These three elements are just constantly interacting, exchanging energy.
Like an ecosystem.
Exactly. Historically, financial capital needed physical capital to amplify human capital.
Okay, unpack that a bit. Give me an example.
Sure. So you buy a tractor, right? That's the physical capital. You
Yeah.
buy it so the farmer, the human capital, can generate more yield to make more money, which is the financial capital.
Got it. So the human was the indispensable engine of that whole loop.
Right. The indispensable engine. But the text argues that the engine has fundamentally changed. And this is where the author actually drops the title of the essay.
Oh, right. Let me pull the quote. They state, "The Antichrist's tendency is to displace the human being with the other two."
Yeah. And we need to pause here because that terminology is, it's highly charged.
Very charged. When I first read Antichrist, I immediately thought of apocalyptic religious texts.
Right, like a beast with 7 heads emerging from the sea or something.
Exactly. But that's not what they mean here, is it?
No, far from it. If you strip away the theological baggage, the author is using Antichrist as this evocative placeholder for the ultimate anti-human force.
Interesting. So anti-human rather than anti-religion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if we accept that the The Christ concept in Western philosophy often represents human elevation, compassion, the intrinsic value of the individual.
Yeah,
Understand?
can't follow.
Then the Antichrist tendency is a systemic mathematical drift
Yeah.
toward rendering the human being just utterly obsolete.
Obsolete, wow. And I want to highlight the word tendency there because it's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
It really is.
It suggests that this isn't, some cabal of evil men in a smoky room twirling their mustaches and plotting against humanity. It's more like, it's like gravity.
Gravity is the perfect analogy.
It's just the natural slope of the system. Like, I was thinking about this, like a three-legged stool, right?
Okay, a stool.
Yeah, so you've got the financial leg, the physical leg, and the human leg. And suddenly the financial and physical legs are growing at light speed, and the human leg is just getting entirely crushed under the weight.
That's a great visual.
Yeah.
Because let's look at the friction inherent in that human leg. Human capital.
It costs tons.
Humans require 8 hours of sleep. We get sick. We demand meaning in our lives. We unionize. We make mathematical errors.
We need to take lunch breaks.
Exactly. And we require a living wage to afford the houses that those supercomputers are buying up. So from the perspective of pure, unadulterated financial capital, the human being is just this wildly inefficient, volatile variable.
So to the algorithm, we are basically just a bottleneck to infinite growth.
We are the ultimate bottleneck. So the tendency that gravity you mentioned is for financial capital to just fund physical capital, meaning advanced technology and AI.
Specifically to bypass us.
Exactly, to bypass the human bottleneck entirely. The capital doesn't hate you, it mathematically doesn't need you anymore.
Man, that is chilling. So is the author arguing that technology and money are inherently evil, or just that the tendency to prioritize them over humans is the danger?
It's definitely the latter. The tools themselves are neutral. It's the prioritization that's the threat. And the author doesn't just leave this as some abstract philosophy, right? They anchor it to the real world.
Right. They bring in some very specific examples.
Yeah, they introduce this massive paradox regarding how we use data and surveillance. They actually use Palantir as the ultimate mirror reflecting this tendency.
Palantir, the massive data integration software company.
That's the one.
Yeah.
The author draws a really sharp contrast here. They posit that using Palantir's God-tier data integration in 1998 to, say, map terror networks and prevent a catastrophe like 9/11 that is inherently pro-people.
Pro-people, because it's leveraging physical capital to protect human capital.
Exactly. It serves human life.
But then they pivot. They jump ahead to 2026, and they look at using that exact same multi-billion-dollar military-grade architecture to issue speeding tickets.
Yeah, making the issuance and collection of speeding tickets as hyper-efficient as possible. And the author labels that explicitly as anti-human.
Wait, okay, anti-human. I mean, getting a speeding ticket sucks, but how is it anti-human?
Well, let's deconstruct the speeding ticket example. Why does the author call it anti-human? Because it completely perverts the purpose of the technology.
Okay, how so?
Think about the mechanics of a modern speeding ticket scenario. You have this sprawling surveillance apparatus, cameras on every light, license plate readers, automated speed trackers, direct algorithmic links to your bank account or the DMV.
Right, it's all interconnected now.
Yeah. And when that God-tier system is used to micromanage your daily commute, it is essentially turning the everyday human being into a farmable resource for municipal revenue.
A farmable resource.
Oh,
Oh, wow. So it's not about safety, it's about extraction.
exactly. It serves financial and systemic efficiency rather than human flourishing.
It's just the sheer banality of hypersurveillance. It creates this constant ambient friction in your life. You aren't being protected from terrorists anymore. You are being financially squeezed over going 3 miles per hour over the limit.
Right. And the state is using physical capital, the cameras, the AI, to extract financial capital from human capital. It's incredibly oppressive when you really stop and think about the power dynamic there.
Yeah, the power dynamic is totally skewed.
It's historically what we call the panopticon.
The panopticon. Remind me of the exact definition of that.
Sure. It's an architectural concept for a prison. The state sits in this central guard tower, utterly obscured in shadow. And you, the citizen, sit in a brightly lit cell.
So they can see you, but you can't see them.
Right. You are constantly aware you might be watched at any given moment, even if there isn't a guard actively looking at you right then.
And that asymmetry of information creates compliance.
Yes, compliance.
Yeah.
But it also creates profound, deep alienation. You feel like a subject, not a citizen.
Okay, but here's where the text gets really interesting to me. The author says, wait, what if we just flip the camera around?
Yeah, this is a huge pivot.
They propose an alternative use for this exact same surveillance technology, and they call it reverse surveillance.
Which is such a fascinating concept. Inverting the panopticon. Taking that omniscient eye and giving it to the people so they can watch the central tower.
Right. Instead of the state watching the citizen uses AI to watch the state. And the author gives some very specific, radical examples of how this would enhance democracy.
Like voting via your phone.
Yes, frictionless voting yielding like 90% turnout. But more importantly, the author talks about deploying AI to act as this personal lobbyist for the everyday citizen.
Which would be revolutionary.
Totally. Imagine your personal AI scrutinizing a 3,000-page congressional omnibus bill. You know, the ones they pass at midnight.
Oh, the ones nobody actually reads.
Exactly. The AI reads all the legalese instantly. It cross-references it with a public ledger of every single political donation ever made. And then it serves you a plain English summary right on your phone.
This paragraph gives a tax break to the company that just donated $2 million to your representative's pay key.
Yes, imagine getting that notification. That shifts the power entirely to the citizen.
Think about how that alters the fundamental mechanics of power. Modern legislation is intentionally designed with maximum friction.
Obfuscation as a feature.
Exactly. A feature, not a bug. Bills are thousands of pages long because politicians know that human capitals, the voters, the journalists, even the other lawmakers, they physically do not have the bandwidths to read them.
It allows politicians to operate in the shadows while smiling in the spotlight.
But if I have a personal AI agent that never sleeps, never gets bored by dry tax law, and instantly flags corruption,
the shadow totally disappears. Every single dollar is tracked in real time.
the power goes to the citizen, as the author states.
But I do want to push back on one thing here. Let's play devil's advocate regarding that frictionless mobile voting concept.
Okay, let's hear it.
If it's literally just a tap on a phone, if casting a vote for the leader of the free world requires the exact same physical effort as, like, liking a photo of someone's lunch on social media, doesn't that reduce the civic weight of voting? Does it genuinely create a well-informed electorate, or does it just trivialize the whole process?
The classic argument that friction in voting, standing in the rain, finding your polling place, taking time off work, acts as a filter for civic commitment.
Yeah. Like, if you don't care enough to stand in line, maybe you shouldn't be making massive geopolitical decisions.
Right, but the author rejects that premise completely. To them, friction is just a tool of voter suppression disguised as civic virtue.
Voter suppression disguised as virtue. That's a strong phrase.
It is. By removing the friction entirely and pairing it with that AI-driven hypertransparency, the author assumes human beings will suddenly become hyper-rational, fully informed actors.
Which is a pretty big assumption about human nature.
It really is. It relies on the belief that voter apathy is caused purely by a lack of access to clear information, rather than, a fundamental flaw or laziness in human nature.
Let's take that a step further, though, because the author doesn't just stop at fixing local elections. If we accept that extreme tracking and digital infrastructure can solve political opacity, they argue it can scale up.
Oh, they scale it way up to a dizzying level.
Right. They look at the Americas and they propose using digital public infrastructure as this geopolitical panacea for our absolute most intractable physical world problems.
This is perhaps the most provocative application of physical capital in the entire text.
So we're talking about uprooting Mexican cartels and tackling U.S. immigration.
Yes. The author looks at the devastating cartel violence in Mexico and the incredibly complex immigration crisis in the U.S. and prescribes a single, purely technological cure.
And what is that cure?
The universal adoption of Aadhaar and UPI.
Okay, for you listening who might not be deep in the weeds of sovereign digital architecture, let's unpack what Aadhaar and UPI actually are, because this is crucial to the author's argument.
Right. Let's start with Aadhaar. It is India's massive biometric identification system.
So not just a driver's license.
No, we're talking about a verifiable, unique digital identity tied directly to your physical body, your irises and your fingerprints.
Okay, and UPI?
UPI is the Unified Payments Interface. It's an instant, real-time, zero-fee digital payment grid.
Frictionless money transfer.
Exactly. So when you fuse Aadhaar and UPI together, you get an economic environment where every single transaction, from buying a single cup of coffee to transferring millions of dollars, is instantly logged on a centralized digital ledger.
And it's permanently attached to your verified biological identity.
Yes. Which effectively makes anonymous, untraceable commerce mathematically impossible.
So let's look at the author's underlying logic regarding the Mexican cartels. How do cartels currently thrive?
They thrive on shadow economies.
Right. They traffic in narcotics, weapons, human beings. And they do it almost entirely in the dark. They need massive pallets of physical cash. They need anonymity to bribe local police chiefs without leaving a paper trail.
What the author is illustrating here is that the cartels rely entirely on the friction and the opacity of analog money. Cash. So if a sovereign state successfully mandates Aadhaar and UPI universally, and physical cash is marginalized to the point where it's totally irrelevant,
The shadow economy collapses.
it instantly collapses. The cartel cannot pay its foot soldiers, it cannot launder billions of dollars through shell companies because the AI-driven ledger would instantly flag the anomaly.
You aren't fighting the cartel with bullets or military raids anymore. You are literally starving them of financial oxygen by digitizing the atmosphere.
That's a great way to put it. Digitizing the atmosphere.
It's an incredible thought experiment. But let's apply it to the author's second major point. Taking this biometric financial grid across the entire Americas to solve undocumented immigration. The logic operates on the exact same mechanism, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Let's ask the root question. Why does someone risk their life to cross a border through a blazing desert?
It is almost exclusively an economic calculation.
Exactly. It is the pursuit of human capital, finding a better market for its labor so it can generate financial capital to send home.
But if an immutable biometric payment system covers the entire hemisphere,
The concept of the physical border evaporates. A physical wall just becomes a redundant 20th century antique.
wait, explain the mechanics of how the wall becomes redundant.
Because if you cross that physical border, but you cannot ping the continental UPI system with a valid, authorized biometric ID, you literally cannot exist in the economy.
Wow.
You can't rent an apartment. You can't buy a loaf of bread at the grocery store. And most importantly, an employer cannot physically pay you for your labor without the state ledger flagging an unauthorized transaction.
So undocumented migration becomes economically impossible. The digital infrastructure becomes this absolute impenetrable membrane.
Yes, the formalization of the economy completely replaces physical border enforcement.
Okay, but hold on. I have to call out the massive, glaring tension here.
The paradox.
The paradox. Because, wait, the author just warned us, like 2 paragraphs ago, about the anti-human nature of hyper-surveillance with the speeding tickets. They painted the panopticon as this awful dystopia.
Right.
But now, isn't implementing a continent-wide, inescapable biometric and financial tracking system the ultimate form of surveillance? How is the state literally knowing every time I buy a pack of gum not the AntiChrist tendency?
That is the ultimate Faustian bargain of the digital age.
Yeah.
And it's the central friction of this essay. The author is forcing us to weigh the physical horrors of the analog world.
Like cartel violence and human trafficking.
Exactly. Weighing that against the invisible chains of the digital world is eradicating the very real, visceral violence of the cartels worth the price of absolute state omniscience.
Can a society utilize a weapon of total surveillance purely for pro-human outcomes without the system inevitably drifting back toward anti-human extraction?
It's a huge question.
Yeah.
The author seems to rely on that reverse surveillance we discussed earlier to act as the counterbalance.
The AI reading the bills.
Right. The idea is, if the state tracks the citizen's money, the citizen's AI tracks the state's money. It's mutually assured transparency.
Mutually assured transparency. I like that. But historically, the entity that owns the physical capital, the servers, the fiber optic cables, the databases, they rarely cede power willingly to the citizens.
Almost never.
And what happens when that physical capital is owned not even by a democratic state, but by private financial monoliths?
Oh, well, that brings us right to a part of the text that feels viscerally real today.
Mm.
The author calls it the banking dystopia.
Yes, the banking dystopia.
Huh.
This perfectly encapsulates the collision of the 3 capitals we started with.
The author points directly to the housing market, specifically naming the BlackRock supercomputer. We touched on that microsecond house bidding scenario in the intro. Let's really delve into the macroeconomic logic behind it.
Okay, let me read the direct quote from the text. If the idea is to algorithmically maximize returns on financial capital, the BlackRock supercomputer figured out to turn homeowners into renters.
To understand the true gravity of this, you have to look at how asset management algorithms actually operate at scale. Their prime directive is yield, continuous, infinite yield.
Right.
Now, traditionally, a human buys a house, pays a mortgage for 30 years, and then they stop paying. They build equity. They own the asset outright.
It's the American dream.
But from the perspective of an algorithm seeking infinite continuous yield, homeownership is a dead end.
A dead end for the algorithm, but literally the absolute bedrock of the middle class for the human being.
Yeah, it's exactly the conflict. The algorithm calculates that if institutional capital outbids human buyers, acquires a massive portfolio of single-family homes, and converts them into permanent rental properties, they transform a finite asset into a perpetual revenue stream.
It's like playing Monopoly against a supercomputer.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
Right. Imagine sitting down to Monopoly and you're playing against a machine that buys up all the properties on the board, not because it needs a place to stay when it lands on Baltic Avenue, but purely to force every human player to pay rent until they go bankrupt.
Yes. They invent a subscription model for human shelter. You will own nothing, and you will pay rent every month to a server farm.
That's incredibly dark. And the author highlights the sheer mathematical absurdity of this outcome by looking at the physical reality of housing.
This stat is staggering.
They write, there are enough empty houses across America that all of Australia could migrate, but there is a housing crisis in America.
Let's visualize that for a second. Roughly 26 million people live in Australia. The author is pointing out that there are enough vacant properties, secondary homes, artificially withheld units, and investment properties in the United States to house an entire continent's worth of human beings.
An entire continent. So the physical resources, the wood, the concrete, the copper wiring, the roofs, they exist in absolute abundance.
There is zero physical scarcity of shelter. The scarcity is entirely a hallucination created by the ledger.
An artificial scarcity.
Enforced by financial capital. The supercomputer hoards the physical capital to restrict the supply, thereby driving up the rent extracted from the human capital.
And the physical result is actual human beings sleeping in tents on the sidewalk in the shadow of empty, algorithmically owned houses.
It is the Antichrist tendency manifested in concrete and drywall. Human capital people who need shelter just to survive, to raise children, to have basic dignity, they're actively crushed, so the financial capital can optimize its quarterly returns.
It really is a regression to neo-feudalism, isn't it?
Absolutely. The algorithms act as the absentee lords of the manor, and the citizens are perpetual serfs. They're just tilling the soil of their gig economy jobs just to pay the digital rent. It is a society mathematically optimized for human anxiety.
Okay, so if this algorithmic feudalism is the disease, what is the author's cure? Because the essay takes a very radical pivot here.
Big radical.
It doesn't call for a violent revolution. It doesn't call for massive government regulation or antitrust laws. In a really shocking twist, the author looks to the architects of the physical capital, the tech industry itself, to execute what they call the AntiChrist move.
Right. But before they lay out the economic roadmap for that, the author does something really vital. They completely demystify artificial intelligence.
Oh, I loved this part.
They write, AI is not alive. It is physical. It is material. It is not human.
I feel like we really needed that grounding because pop culture desperately wants AI to be a god or a demon or a sentient being that's going to wake up and judge us.
The sci-fi mysticism.
Exactly. But the author looks at a massive language model or a predictive algorithm and basically says, no, that's just a very complicated hammer. It's server racks, silicon, and electricity. It's a tool.
And because it is a tool completely devoid of inherent morality, its impact depends entirely on the hand wielding it. If financial capital wields it, you get the banking dystopia we just talked about.
But the author proposes an alternative hand wielding the hammer.
Yes. The greatest anti-Antichrist move tech bros could make is to end poverty through direct cash transfers globally.
The text is incredibly specific about how to execute this, too. They say, forget wealth tax, forget governments, forget the NGOs. Build direct cash transfers through the Aadhaar UPI framework.
This is such a fascinating glimpse into a sort of techno-libertarian ethos.
Techno-libertarian. Break that down.
Well, the author views traditional mechanisms of wealth redistribution as fundamentally hopelessly broken. The idea of taxing billionaires so a sprawling federal bureaucracy can slowly trickle aid down through various state agencies and nonprofits, they just dismiss it as archaic and inefficient.
So they want to bypass the state apparatus entirely.
Entirely. They want the generators of massive algorithmic wealth to build a direct pipeline to the absolute poorest people on Earth. And they suggest starting in India.
Okay, why start in India specifically?
The rationale is twofold. First, as the author notes, India possesses a massive, highly successful middle class and a staggering number of billionaires, but it simultaneously grapples with a sub-Saharan-sized population living in extreme poverty.
So it's the ultimate proving ground for wealth disparity.
Exactly. But second, and more importantly, India already possesses the Aadhaar and UPI digital infrastructure required to bypass the state. The pipes are already laid.
Ah, right. Which brings us to arguably the most important two words in this entire section of the text: zero leakage.
Zero leakage. It is the holy grail of philanthropy and welfare.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because traditional NGO leakage is a huge problem, right?
And massive problem.
Yeah.
Consider how traditional aid operates today. A nation allocates, say, $1 billion for famine relief in a developing country. That money passes through federal agencies. Then international banking fees. Then NGO administrative overhead. Then logistics contractors. And inevitably, local corruption on the ground.
Every single middleman takes a percentage.
Exactly. By the time that $1 billion reaches the ground, the actual human being who is starving might receive pennies on the dollar. That lost capital, that's the leakage.
But if you use the Aadhaar and UPI biometric grid, a foundation algorithm in Silicon Valley executes a smart contract, and $50 instantly appears in the digital wallet of a farmer in rural India.
Instantly. There is no middleman. No local warlords can intercept it. No corrupt local official can demand a bribe to put a name on a relief list. The friction is zero. The transfer is mathematically perfect.
That sounds incredible, but I have to push back here on the geopolitical implications of this.
Okay, let's hear the pushback.
Is it incredibly empowering to give direct cash via an app, or is it incredibly dangerous to let unelected tech founders completely bypass democratic governments to run global welfare?
It's a massive shift in power.
Right. I mean, if I am starving, obviously I don't care if my food money comes from the UN or a tech foundation. Cash is cash. My kids need to eat. But geopolitically,
It represents an unprecedented privatization of the social contract.
yes, because governments derive their legitimacy and their power largely from their ability to provide a safety net for their citizens.
Right. If a coalition of tech companies assumes the role of the primary provider for half the population of a sovereign nation, who's truly governing that nation?
To whom does the citizen pledge allegiance? The parliament that argues on television, or the app on their phone that literally guarantees their survival every Friday?
It's a massive transfer of soft power. The author is suggesting that physical capital, the tech companies, use their financial capital to directly support human capital, deliberately cutting the traditional state out of the triad entirely.
Which begs a very practical question.
Mhm.
How on earth is this funded perpetually? We are talking about ending global poverty. The scale of financial capital required is astronomical.
It's staggering.
Even the wealthiest tech companies couldn't sustain zero leakage cash transfers to hundreds of millions of people without bankrupting their core operations.
The author anticipates this exact math problem, and they propose a structural corporate revolution to solve it. This leads us to the boldest architectural blueprint in the text, the 10% Foundation.
Okay, the 10% Foundation. Here's the proposal directly from the text. Every unicorn and beyond tech company volunteers to give 10% ownership to a foundation. That foundation has a one-point agenda: direct cash transfers to the poorest.
So the author is calling for a voluntary industry-wide tithe. From the billion-dollar private startups, the unicorns, to the trillion-dollar public behemoths, every entity generating algorithmic wealth cedes 10% of its equity to a singular, globally focused foundation.
But wait, how do the founders ever agree to this? I mean, you don't get to be a trillion-dollar tech giant by happily giving away control of your empire. If you give away 10% of your ownership, you dilute your voting control, right? You open yourself up to hostile takeovers.
Normally, yes. But the text provides a remarkably elegant financial mechanism to circumvent the ego and the control issue. The author writes, "Since you do need to run your companies, split the shares. You keep the voting power. The foundation gets the money and does cash transfers."
Splitting the shares. Now, this isn't science fiction, right? This is an actual mechanism used in corporate governance today.
Oh, absolutely. Dual-class stock structures. Companies like Meta and Alphabet already use variations of this to ensure the founders retain absolute control even as the company goes public and sells shares.
How does that work, simply?
You create Class A shares that hold all the voting rights, they're the steering wheel, and you create Class B shares that hold the financial rights, the engine's output.
So the author is proposing weaponizing this corporate loophole for global welfare.
Weaponizing the loophole, I love that.
The tech titans get to stay in the driver's seat, like a self-driving car, right?
Yeah.
You sit in the driver's seat and program the destination, the voting power. But the engine's power, the wealth generated, is wired directly into the public grid to power the rest of the city.
It solves the efficiency problem perfectly. Because you don't want a bloated, bureaucratic charity foundation trying to run a cutting-edge AI company.
Right. They'd ruin it.
Exactly. You want the visionary founders running the tech, while the foundation acts purely as a passive financial beneficiary, executing the AHAR and UPI transfers.
And the author really acknowledges human greed here, which I appreciate. They aren't asking the tech titans to become ascetics and live in monasteries.
No, the text explicitly says, consume all you want to consume. What you will not consume, give away.
It's a very pragmatic view of human nature. The author is basically saying, buy the mega yacht, buy the private island, live in absolute unfathomable luxury.
Because the wealth generated by exponential algorithmic physical capital is so vast, there is a literal ceiling to what a single human being can physically consume.
Even if you buy 10 private jets.
Right. Once you hit that ceiling, what is the point of hoarding the rest of the numbers on a ledger? Just funnel the overflow into the human capital base.
But the author doesn't stop at just funding a permanent welfare state. They project this system forward on a timeline, and the conclusion is just mind-bending.
It really goes into warp speed here.
They write, tech bros may consume all they want to consume onto 2 generations, why not 3? Because there will be no more money, no more currency in the third. The economy will have become moneyless.
A moneyless economy within 3 generations. This is where the text transcends economic policy and enters the realm of, like, utopian futurism.
Totally. We really have to dissect the underlying logic that leads from give money to the poor to money ceases to exist entirely. How do we get there?
I think the bridge between those 2 points is the concept of absolute abundance. If these AI-driven companies continue to scale exponentially,
Okay, let's play that out.
right, so if automated robotics build our housing, if AI optimizes fusion energy grids to provide free power, if automated vertical farms produce infinite calories, and the 10% foundation ensures every human on Earth has frictionless access to that output.
Then the fundamental premise of economics evaporates.
Exactly. Traditional economics is literally the study of how society allocates scarce resources.
What is money, really?
Money is not real. It is a shared hallucination. It's a technological ledger we invented to manage friction and scarcity. It decides who gets the limited grain and who gets the limited housing.
So if physical capital, the technology, advances to a point where resources are no longer limited, the ledger becomes mathematically obsolete.
It's the post-scarcity horizon. Think about the air you breathe. You don't pay for oxygen because it exists in absolute abundance. You only pay for oxygen if you are scuba diving when a technological barrier creates artificial scarcity.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
The author is predicting that within 3 generations, the tech ecosystem will make housing, food, healthcare, and basic luxury as ubiquitous and frictionless as oxygen.
The AntiChrist tendency defeats itself. By obsessively optimizing physical capital to bypass the human, it eventually creates so much automated abundance that the financial capital, the money itself, dissolves into irrelevance.
Yes, we're left with just the benevolent machines and the liberated humans.
It is a dizzying, profoundly optimistic leap of faith. But let's actually play this out. Let's look at the psychology of a third-generation citizen living in this moneyless reality.
Okay, let's look at a day in the life.
Right. If you wake up and your baseline survival, your beautiful algorithmically printed house, your lab-grown food, your health is totally guaranteed by the silent ambient hum of the physical capital around you, what do you actually do with your day?
A lot of critics of universal basic income argue that without the threat of starvation, human beings will just descend into lethargy. We'll just, play video games in VR and atrophy.
But that view assumes that the only valid human motivation is the avoidance of suffering. If we remove the friction of survival, does ambition die or does it merely mutate?
Look at Wikipedia.
Wikipedia.
Yeah. Millions of hours of human labor,
Yeah.
meticulous research, coding, editing given completely for free. No one is paid to build Wikipedia.
Oh, I see what you mean.
They do it for prestige, for community, for the inherent human desire to categorize and share knowledge.
Exactly the point. In a post-scarcity, moneyless society, kind of like a Star Trek economy, the currency shifts. We abandon the accumulation of financial capital and move toward the accumulation of cultural, intellectual, and social capital.
Status is no longer determined by the size of your bank account because everyone has infinite access.
Status is determined by what you create. You write a brilliant novel, you discover a new mathematical theorem, you become a master chef.
The human being, previously displaced by the AntiChrist tendency, is suddenly elevated to a state of pure self-actualization. The human leg of the stool becomes the only one that truly matters again.
It is a beautiful vision, but we really cannot ignore the immense perilous chasm between our current banking dystopia and that moneyless horizon.
The chasm is wide and deep.
The transition period, those first and second generations, requires the architects of physical capital to act with unprecedented benevolence. It requires them to voluntarily split their shares and fund the foundation.
And history rarely shows the powerful relinquishing leverage without being forced.
Right, and it requires the digital public infrastructure, the Aadhaar and UPI grids, to remain totally immune to the authoritarian impulses of the panopticon. It's like walking a tightrope over a geopolitical volcano.
The author's blueprint is less a guarantee and more a challenge to us. They have laid out the machinery. The gears can either grind human capital into dust to maximize the ledger, or they can be rerouted to eliminate the ledger entirely.
Well said. To wrap up this incredibly dense deep dive, we started with the triad of capital. We looked at the Antichrist tendency displacing humans. We navigated the dual-edged sword of Palantir and reverse surveillance.
We survived the banking dystopia.
Barely. And we ended on a radical roadmap for a moneyless future funded by tech unicorns. So, to you listening, the next time you pick up your phone to pay for a coffee, or you scroll past an article about algorithmic housing markets, or you look at the biometric scanner at an airport.
Think about this text.
Exactly. You aren't just looking at isolated tech updates, you are looking at the raw materials of this exact struggle. The physical capital is currently neutral. The financial capital is currently ravenous.
And the human capital is caught in the middle, waiting to see if the engine will crush us or set us free.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on the reality of that third generation. Let's say the author is entirely correct.
Let's assume we make it.
We cross the chasm. We reach the post-scarcity world. AI generates perfect art, robots build flawless architecture, and physical abundance is absolute. In a world where perfection is infinite, instantaneous, and completely free, what retains actual value? Perhaps when a machine can replicate a masterpiece in a microsecond, the only thing that will hold true currency is the authentic, inefficient, flawed human struggle that went into the original creation.
Wow.
When everything is perfect, imperfection might become the most priceless capital of all. Something to think about on your own. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.